My friends, what happened behind the scenes at the White House in the last 48 hours was not just a simple courtesy visit. It was a surgical operation to extract the truth. While the mainstream media and activists desperately tried to ridicule the official image of the meeting, looking for flaws in shadows and claiming artificial intelligence was used to try to deny the physical reality of the facts, the most powerful man on the planet solemnly ignored all the formal protocols of the Itamaraty to hear what is really happening in Brazil's institutional underbelly. Look at how desperate the bureaucratic establishment is. My friends, they tried to stoop to the lowest level of narrative by saying that the photo was a cheap fake, because the system's brain simply can't process the collapse of its own international relevance. To understand the real symbol of this paradigm shift, we need to use a clear metaphor about how power communicates in the 21st century. The current administration in Brasilia operates like an old rotary phone, remember? A noisy, slow relic tied to old and outdated cables that keeps trying to dial out to the outside world without realizing that the line is dead and no one is on the other end to answer the call. While the Planalto Palace tries to crank the handle of this heavy bureaucracy, the parallel strategic axis connecting Donald Trump's moves and Brazilian conservative leaders is already operating on a 5G satellite connection. A high-speed network that ignores intermediaries, cuts the wires of institutional censorship, and transmits raw power data directly on the real frequency of the Oval Office. No one is treating this as seriously as it deserves. But the truth is that the Itamaraty tried everything, using intermediaries and powerful economic figures to beg for this meeting between Flávio Bolsonaro and President Trump to be cancelled. But they failed miserably because the official establishment found out it no longer has the power to cut off the signal of an alliance that was sealed by a direct invitation from Washington's own leadership wing. And there's more. The hysterical whining we see in the media today is the exact sound of a system that realized it lost social control. What is that? Pay attention, because Trump didn't use that private conversation time to ask about superficial electoral strategy or short-term opinion polls. He wanted to understand the human factor and the real level of political persecution that has taken hold in the Southern Hemisphere. Donald Trump and Flávio Bolsonaro discussed a broad strategic agenda involving Brazil's political future, international relations, the economy, security, and political alignment. According to the account given by one of the participants in the meeting, one of the main topics of the conversation was the situation of Jair Bolsonaro, as we will discuss later, including his imprisonment, health problems, political persecution, and the latest developments in Brazil. Trump reportedly showed strong interest in the case and discussed the importance of protecting conservative leaders who are politically persecuted. Economic issues were also discussed, and strategic ones, such as Brazil's potential in rare earths, energy cooperation, and economic complementarity between Brazil and the United States. Flávio Bolsonaro presented the idea of a foreign policy based on the concept of Brazil First, inspired by Donald Trump's America First. Defending pragmatic relations with powers like China, but with closer ties to Western allies, especially Israel and the United States. The conversation also addressed freedom of expression, judicial censorship. Look, there's Moraes, folks. Combating drug trafficking and Chinese influence in Latin America, and strengthening an international conservative alliance for future elections in Brazil. Sitting with Flávio and Eduardo Bolsonaro and journalist Paulo Figueiredo, and without the need for translators, by the way, the first question the American leader asked was direct and sharp. How is President Jair Bolsonaro? Trump wanted to understand the operational details of each restriction that was imposed against the man he publicly calls his greatest strategic ally in the region. He wanted to know about the restrictions on movement, the retention of documents, and the real health risks. The weakened former head of state, who became the main target of a power consortium that tries to shape Brazil's destiny through the power of their pens. According to Paulo himself, Paulo Figueiredo, on his social media, Trump said, "Look, if it were me, I wouldn't have gone back to Brazil. Would I have stayed in the United States? Would I have helped him?" Yes, my friends, this statement is not just a casual guess. It's a geopolitical warning issued by someone who has control over global intelligence reports and fully understands who the hidden architects are that designed the logistics of lawfare against the conservative opposition. The political system in Brasilia trembled because it knows that every technical detail of this persecution was catalogued and handed directly to President Trump. This is no longer just a rhetorical dispute in an empty chamber of the Brazilian Congress. The situation has now escalated and has been turned into an international dossier on violations of fundamental rights, which is now on the desk of the greatest military and economic superpower on the planet. And when the Oval Office decides to validate the seriousness of this information, the rhetorical shield of the current government evaporates, making it clear that what they called the defense of democracy is interpreted in Washington as an authoritarian process that has crossed all international red lines. The conflict becomes even more evident when we observe the petty and purely ideological reaction of the Itamaraty apparatus, which rushed to issue public statements, denying use of space at the Brazilian embassy for the press conference held by the conservative delegation, Flávio Bolsonaro and his team. The bureaucratic justification that the trip was not an official state trip is a flimsy excuse that exposes the double standard that has taken over our diplomatic institutions. Look at the level of contradiction that no one in the press has the courage to expose. The same Itamaraty which cites technical reasons to close its doors to an elected senator of the Republic. It's the same apparatus that allowed a left-wing comedian to use the official facilities of the embassy in Rome for months on end, as if it were a private luxury hotel. Fábio Pochá is his name. All for free, paid with public money, isn't that right? Well, he recorded personal entertainment content under the complacent silence of the Brazilian authorities. But for Flávio, who was indeed going to meet Donald Trump, an ally of Brazil, there was no room at the embassy. But this petty sabotage doesn't come out of nowhere. It is the direct continuation of a historical pattern of corporatist betrayal that has been brewing in the corridors of left-wing diplomacy for years. It's worth remembering that in the past, these same diplomats actively worked behind the scenes internationally to boycott and block vital agreements for the national economy, such as the trade treaty between Mercosur and the European Union, solely to deny a political victory to Bolsonaro's government at that time. Yes, my friends, deliberately acting against the interests of their own country to safeguard a partisan agenda. That's the left in Brazil. These people bet everything on the absolute certainty that Bolsonarism was a passing phenomenon and that the old regime would be forever protected in the cushioned seats of bureaucratic power. They forgot, however, that the conservative movement doesn't depend on a presidential seat to exist. It is a legitimate and organic force rooted in the soul of the Brazilian people that continues to grow and expand. And now, as they realize that the winds of history have changed direction, and that the leadership they tried to boycott is being received with the deference reserved for a head of state, inside the political heart of the Western world, these bureaucrats are panicking because they know that the era of administrative impunity is coming to an end. When the tables turn, each of these partisan diplomats will have to answer for the acts of sabotage they committed against their own country's representation. And the plan B for their careers will be the only viable way out in the face of the institutional audit that awaits them. My friends, they are desperate. The plain truth is that this move by Flávio Bolsonaro in the United States, who is actually still there, was of the highest level, and he delivered a technical checkmate to the international ambitions of Lula's government, definitively cancelling out any political gain that the official visit, which took place a few weeks ago, could have generated. Lula was received in Washington with the cold formalities reserved for a head of state they were obligated to receive, being treated behind the scenes as an inconvenient geopolitical client, who openly supported Trump's opponents in the last American election, and who insists on empty speeches about moving beyond the dollar and automatically aligning with global dictatorships. Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, yes, my friends, the conservative delegation. Flávio Bolsonaro, on the other hand, was received with the closeness and trust of someone who is part of the same leadership team, who will dictate the economic and security rules of the planet starting next year. The most striking symbol of this reality was the presentation of a genuine ceremonial insignia given directly by Trump, a token of appreciation that the current Brazilian president has never received and will never receive. This highlights which side truly has the strategic affinity of the world's greatest power. Not to mention, of course, the photo that was taken in the Oval Office. Lula doesn't have a photo in the Oval Office. Well, Flávio's photo has Flávio Eduardo Paulo Figueiredo and, of course, Donald Trump. And do you know who hates that? The entire left. You know who else? Alexandre de Moraes. Those people from the Supreme Court. They can't stand it. And look at the depth of the proposals that were put on the table and made the international agencies cover it. Reuters, Bloomberg, and Agence France-Presse sent out global alerts. The main agenda brought by the opposition in Brazil, the Brazilian right, demands that Washington formally classify the PCC and Comando Vermelho as international terrorist organizations. This is a masterstroke that puts the system in a political trap with no way out, because the current government will be forced to use its bureaucratic machinery to try to defend these criminal factions under the pretext of national sovereignty, blatantly exposing to the average voter its ties to organized crime. Classifying these factions as terrorist entities in the United States means the immediate freezing of their accounts, business operations, and assets abroad. A line of attack that the Palácio do Planalto cannot adopt at the risk of financially suffocating the structures that sustain social chaos in Brazil. Add this to the formal commitment that Brazil will join the Shield of the Americas initiative starting in January next year. And the scenario ceases to be a mere internal electoral dispute to become a complete hemispheric geopolitical realignment. The system in Brasilia is collapsing this very week. Because the accumulation of internal crises ranging from popular discontent with the rampant inflation that erodes the real value of food in supermarkets, they include the corruption scandals at the INSS which affect the presidential clan and reach the persistent rumors about Lula's physical weakness and serious medical treatments. It proves that official power is melting from within. If the establishment tries any desperate judicial maneuver or last-minute show of force against the conservative candidacy, they won't be facing just a senator or a Brazilian political party. They will be going head-to-head against the international protective wall of the direct ally of the man who commands the Oval Office. The era of bureaucratic isolation has begun, and the signs of the times show that the fall of the official line is just a matter of time. But now I want to separate those who just watch videos for entertainment from those who really understand the game. I want your technical take here in the comments. If you believe that Brasilia's rotary phone can still fool the people and that the current bureaucratic machine is just a broken relic the world has already forgotten, write it in the comments. Deadline. Yes. Write it here. Now, if you're one of those who understand that the Trump-Bolsonaro connection is the signal that will restart Brazil and that the real power network is operating by satellite. Above censorship, above the system, write 5G connection. I'm going to read each of these comments to find out who here is an elite analyst and who is still stuck in superficial armchair analysis. Share your perspective because the time for doubt is over. The stage is set and the pieces are already moving behind the scenes, but the truth is, what you see on the surface is just the tip of the iceberg. For those who want to understand the real game before the system collapses for good, the path is not on open networks. That's why we built our Intel bunker, an exclusive platform. A fully protected environment where censorship simply can't stop us. Inside, more than 3,000 elite analysts dissect every geopolitical and economic move in real time, delivering the raw information that no one else has the courage to show. The QR code is on the screen, in the first pinned comment, and in the description. Go there and secure your spot before the doors close. And if you want to protect your home and your family from the social engineering that is destroying our culture, check out our series and movies channel. A curated selection made for you to watch with the ones you love most, with your family. Yes, series and movies, including the geopolitical context of what's happening in the world right now. That's incredible. So, click the link in the description and click the card that will pop up for you. Come join our series and movies channel. Now subscribe, turn on the notification bell, leave a like on this video and share it with your friends. Blend your mind. I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you next time. See you then.